powered by Easier Health Now, Education Now, Pay Later. I'm your host Kunjal, and today we have an incredible guest, Mahashweta Ghosh. She's an endurance runner and ace marketeer who transformed her life from being overweight to conquering the toughest races like Marathon des Sables. With over hundreds of races under her belt, she embodies resilience, perseverance, and a positive mindset. Get ready for an inspiring episode about resilience and transformation. Stay tuned. Marshweta, we've been knowing that your journey has been exemplary from being fat to fit, from being 78 kgs to being a vivid ultra marathon long distance runner. So tell us something about the entire journey and how or when was that stage when you thought you want to go ahead with sports, and when it comes to sports, specifically running, because there are many sport options in our country. Why did you specifically choose running when it comes to self endurance?
So hi Kunjal, it's thank you for having me on your platform. It's an absolute honor. So coming to your question, I had no bone of any sport or athleticism in me in my growing up days. I was a very quiet kid who kind of typically loved to read, and music was my thing. I used to love to paint. I had no interest in any sports barring whatever school needed mandatorily to do. Having said that, I was fairly good with my studies too. So I remember when I was an engineer in college in Bangalore, living in hostel all by myself. Uh, Purely because of maybe not knowing the difference between what is good and what is bad, and you were out of home, you had money, you could eat and do whatever you wanted. I gained a lot of weight, and that's where the 78 kg came in. And I don't know when it started, that I can't tell when it started. And one fine day I just realized I was 78 kgs and I was really not fitting into a 36 size jeans. And I just frantically called my dad and I said, Dad, I just need to do something, I don't know what. And I need to lose weight. And with that weight, what happened was also that I was keeping very unwell. I got PCOD. I put on a lot of, my cycles were irregular. I had a lot of, in today's world, as they say, stress. But I think I was going through a lot of medical complications, because of which I was not really living the most happiest of myself. Uh, and with that kind of living, you're obviously very low in your confidence as well, which was impacting maybe my studies, just in general my being. And I remember this one time in the evening when I called my dad and I was crying and I said I need to lose weight. And my dad said, okay, I mean, but crying is not going to help you lose weight. What do you want from me? So I think I asked him, saying I need some money to go to a nutritionist, and can you please send mom for, like, for a few months so she can monitor my lifestyle closely and help me with my food habits and all of that. Because typically, rush to college, no breakfast, you have first meal in lunch, by then you're hungry, you eat whatever you can lay hands on. That was the kind of lifestyle I was living. So I remember I had my mom come down and I found a dietitian at that point. And then I didn't know any other sport, so to say. So I used to just frantically walk as much as I could. Like, I probably walked, like, I don't know, 2 3 hours in the day, whenever I could lay hand on. And I was living in Bangalore. So weather was not a challenge that I couldn't go out in the morning. Whenever I could spare time, I would find either was a park nearby. I used to go and just walk. And in about 3 months' time, I lost about 16 kgs or so. Just a walk, and of course, a full lifestyle correction of my diet, of what I ate, how much I ate. That dietitian really helped me. And because mom was there, she was able to cook that food the way it was to be, no oil, no spices. She really helped me to kind of cope with some of that stuff, and get me and stick to it. And I think I've been fairly disciplined always. I remember with my studies and the way I lived, I'd always keep my room clean. Those things came probably naturally to me, a lot of it. So sticking to it, like, I knew my goal was set. So I didn't really, and mom being there, I think it was the right amount of push. I didn't have to bother. She took care of that diet to execute. She really helped me. So I think she really helped me do a good team, if I may say. And then after I lost that weight after 3 months, I remember I took the first step to go to a gym. uh, this is, I'm talking about early 2000, when gyms were not as a women thing. It was more a man thing, you know. It was sad. I remember in a place like Bangalore, which is fairly a modern city, so to say, this gym had a closed corner, like a little room for women to work out. They had only limited machines, and we had a separate entry. So we would go there and we would work out and they would come back. I diligently used to do the gym, and I remember for at least 7, 8 years, I constantly retained that weight and I kept going to the gym. So, and I never gave up. I think it was pretty regular with no, I wanted to maintain myself basically. That was like more maintenance. And then in 2012, a friend of mine actually kind of almost pushed me saying you should start running. I think you're already strong because you do gym. It'll be good for you. You'll enjoy it. Try. So I very reluctantly and grudgingly actually signed up for a race, and I did my first run ever was a half marathon, and I finished it in 2 hours 15 minutes, which even today is a commendable decent timing. So that's where it started, and then that day and this day, it's been 11 years since that I've been running, and 20 years since I've been hitting the gym. So that's my fat to fit journey, if I must say.
Right, right, right. Okay, so I suppose, Mahashweta, your mother was the one very strong pillar when it comes to your fat to fit journey. As you mentioned that she was there to support you in your initial days, and of course, after like say like a couple of months, she would head back to her routine. You were on your own routine. In that scenario, how did you manage to be motivated and committed to your goals and also manage your studies because you were studying at that time, I suppose? How were you able to cope up with everything at that point of time?
See, once you have seen the darker side, you're always careful. You don't want to go back to the dark side again. I'd been there to the dark side. I knew what it did to my body. I knew what it did to me. And I think that was a motivation in itself never to go back there. I can very proudly say that it has been 20 years. I don't think my weight has ever crossed 65. I, in between, I broke my foot. I was not able to run. I did everything, but my weight, I would never let it go. It is literally something that I am like ruthfully possessive about because I know what it does to me. So when you have that kind of, and then you saw the success. So the motivation is from the success that you gained. And when you gain that success, you don't want to let go of it. You want to only either hold on or improve. So I think that's where the motivation stayed with me, was a combination of that you don't want to go back to the darker side, and you saw the result, and the result of course kept you going. And by then you also realize that it keeps you energetic, it really helps you to stay fit. You started making friends when you went to the gym. It became a part of your life in the process. Like even if you couldn't go to the gym, you probably end up doing something which is of your physical activity, because physical activity by then had become a part of your routine. Now with mom gone, I think I remember when I joined college, I was doing my MBA. I used to still make my lunch and have breakfast and go carry my lunch to college as well. Most people used to go to canteen and eat whatever they got, but I could not get myself to eating. Maybe once in a while I would indulge, but I usually carried my like dal chawal and sabzi was standard I could do because it was quickest, didn't need time, but it was yet home cooked and it was healthy, so to say. So I think I put that extra effort. I didn't shy away that for me to stay where I have to stay. Now with mom gone, I was still a student, so I couldn't afford to keep like a help who would help me to do it like we have today. So I had to really cope up and find a way around it. So I put a process around it. I think I'm very process driven as well. I still remember funny story that I used to have these two pressure cooker and I had a gas, and at night I would put the rice and the dal in the two pressure cookers. So the first thing I would get up in the morning is wash them and put the gas on and let them boil. By the time I would brush and come back and make my chai. So by the time I have come back from freshened up and come back, I have the dal and chawal literally ready with me. So so some stuff like that, I think I started enjoying incorporating and pushing myself to do it, saying, hey, you got to do it, there's no other choice. It's nobody's giving you an option. If I don't do it, then I'll end up eating whatever is available in the canteen, which is not the most healthiest. It's oily, spicy. You go back to where you are. So it was a gradual process. It didn't all happen overnight, but I think I have I have been resilient through these 20 years of my journey, I think. And that has always been my biggest strength, if I will say. I realize it today, but when I look back and I see what happened all these 20 years, I think one thing that really stands out to me is that I have always been resilient and I've never given up on myself. Most people give up on themselves first. I don't think I ever gave up on myself.
That's amazing. And that's very inspirational to others, who might be struggling or in a fine line between still looking to be resilient and push a little hard and just giving up. So that's very motivational.
I always say this to everybody who says this. We all struggle. You think I don't struggle? I mean, I live in Gurgaon. Today morning itself, when I went to run, the first 3 kilometer was so difficult. I almost thought that, oh my God, like, today is not the day kinds. But then you don't stop. You still do it, and I always believe that at that moment, what you decide is what defines who you are. If I quit, then I will be the quitter. But if I do it, I will be the champion. And that second is what defines or makes or breaks you. And that is it. That is why in all of these self-help books they say no that when you're getting angry, just pause for that 1 second. Similarly, when you're feeling that that feeling that, oh, I'm not able to, take a pause, just take a few deep breaths and then put the step forward, and that's it. That's all it takes.
So, Mashweta, you're mentally very strong when it comes to your goal, your focus. Uh, so, when you were going through the same physical changes or physical transformation, I must say, how did you cope up to be emotionally balanced, mentally balanced, and also because when you are in college, you are very young. When you are, of course, you don't want to go to your dark side, but you have friends, you have colleagues who it's like take care who the people who are not into that zone of being fit and being healthy and being active. So it's not that the thinner people are always fit or always active. It's very important for everyone to be active in their daily chores. So how did you manage to be so resilient, and also how did that impact your friends around you or colleagues around you when it comes to your transformation? Because when it comes to transformation, you always require your family, you always require a support system which is always there around you apart from being mentally strong. So how did you manage to do that?
I honestly would say that I got support, and I had a lot of resistance as well from and through my life. It's not just at that time. I think also the time when family didn't support. My parents also later didn't much support. Especially my father was probably the one who gave me the biggest toughest time. Some of my friends who didn't realize it till lately had always been like, oh, you don't come for late night parties, or even if I go, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to eat this, or I have a long run tomorrow, so I come back early, and so on and so forth. So it is, so a couple of things that I developed as a habit is that to make this as the first thing I do in the morning before the world wakes up. So I'm an early morning person, and I've always stuck to being that. Like I remember I used to hit the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is sleeping. Nobody gets up at 5 o'clock and does anything. Or so keep that dedicated time, which can be less destructive. Because if you keep it in the evening, there's always an excuse. There's work, or there is like friends wanting to go out in college, or there's something happening, you're not feeling well, you're tired, yeah, somebody comes and, "Arey, let it be today, let's go out, let's catch the movie, or let's just go have dinner, whatever." So the first advice I think I can give to people, or maybe what I did, was to make it in a time frame which is non-disruptive. Nobody is disrupting you early morning. So make the habit of getting up early morning, and getting yourself that time to do whatever you need to do in fitness. And as you rightly said, that it's not about fat or lean or whatever. It is about being healthy. and from somebody who had like PCOD and high cholesterol and triglyceride to meet this person that is, nothing in my report is abnormal, has given me is because of this. So staying that healthy, the first thing is to keep that time away. Second thing is that, it's okay for people to not appreciate you. Everybody doesn't have to understand what you're doing. It's all right. At that age, I didn't have that wisdom, and I think I felt bad. But as I said, I was resilient. So I said, yeah, okay, whatever. I sulked, but I still went ahead and did what I had to do because I believed that this is for my good. I always prioritized myself, and I never gave up on me as a rule of thumb, I think. So yeah, there were friends who were like, it's okay, why do you have to do this, that? It's okay. People will say you should know to decide for yourself. And I think I knew that one thing, that this is for me. Like when you study too much, people will say, you don't do anything, you have no life, you should do other things. It is important for holistic growth. When you don't study, people will say, oh, you need to study, otherwise your marks you won't get job. Blah, blah, blah. So whatever you do, irrespective, people will say, let them say, it's all right. How does it change? Nothing actually changes, right? It's just that we think it is so big that somebody said something that we give that saying so much more importance. But what is important? What is the main thing? The main thing for you here is to be healthy. So just keep focused on that. It's okay. And you can always find workarounds. I had great fun in my college life with my friends. I always hung around. I did parties. I did celebrations. I did everything. But I also did this parallelly because it was my choice. Smart choices always help you a long way. Like today, while I was in the gym, I'm going for my race next week. So I was generally, after my race finishes, I eat pizza. It's like a thing because I don't eat pizza, but when I finish the race, I always have pizza. It's my favorite, one of my favorites. So this lady says, "Oh, so much sacrifices we do," and I said, "No, it's not a sacrifice. It's a choice." And when you say sacrifice, you make yourself like a victim. Oh my God, everybody's having fun and I'm losing out on all the fun. But if you see it as a choice that you're making for a greater good, you will feel that will be a motivation to begin with. Don't victimize yourself for doing it. You should feel proud that you're able to do this when, well, not many people are able to do it. They may not have the resource, they may not have the realization. A lot of people start getting fit when they've already hit like a medical condition or something. So don't let that happen to you.
That's true. People will say, but you have to prioritize is what is very important for yourself. Very true. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Marshweta, in the entire transformational process, how did that impact your self perception and self esteem? Also, because you feel confident when you are gaining the goals which you've already set for yourself. How did that evolve throughout your journey?
So this is what I say, that as a runner, or or as a, even as a gymmer, when I didn't run, I mean, nobody, like, the point I want to tell is that you don't have to necessarily run to stay fit. There are other ways to do it. But then for me, whatever I did, even when I was doing more strength training, being the gym, to be able to do, say, a certain kind of exercise, or to be doing a certain weight that you could lift, was a motivation. And to see that success in a day-to-day part of your life gave you a lot of, what do you call, like a feeling of success, a feeling of being a winner. Now, when you start your day feeling like a champion, saying, "Oh, a great workout done," I'm not talking about the biology part of it. Of course, we all know the biological good that it does to your body. I'm talking purely from a psyche per se, that really at least worked for me, was that when you have gone through that, like for example, even the days when you are really tired and sleepy and you don't want to go, but you still show up in the gym and you work out, or you show up on the run, or you do your run, that itself is such a pleasurable feeling. I think that feeling then stays along with you and gives you that, what do you call, strength in yourself and confidence in yourself to battle and fight a lot of other stuff. Uh, you just cope. And especially as a runner, I think when you go through the whole running training journey, there's a lot that you're going through. There is there is not all days are good. There is a lot of days when you're struggling, when it's really hard, when it's difficult, you're coping, and then by the end of the day, when you're done, you there are times even when you're done, you're not feeling your best, but then you learn to just deal with it, live with it the day the way you do, and then you go on to the next day. I think these are certain skills that over the years I developed through my sport, and once I developed them doing every day, every day, every day, it became a habit, or like my character. So today all of this is more my character than an acquired skill. I acquired it through my sport, and then it became a habit or a nature, if you may say. So that's what it is. And because imagine 20 years of doing this every day. I mean, anything that you do for 3 months, you become a habit. I've been doing it for 20 years.
It's a part of your life now.
Yeah, yeah, it's who I have become, and that is why I value my sport so much, because it's not just what it has done to my body, it's also what is done to my mind and to me and to my character, and which is reflected in my profession. I think I have, since I've developed and worked on myself through my sport, uh, I think I've grown professionally also tremendously. Like anywhere, any organization, any leader I've worked with, you pull out, and they will only have amazing things to talk about me, which I feel so very good about. Saying, she is always top of her game, and I'm top of my game because I'm working on it diligently every single day. That's what all self-help books are also actually telling us to do as a practice, right? Like, so I'm doing it through my sport. That's it. It's no different than any of that stuff.
Right, right. And you be when you are consistent in your the likeliness, which is your sport, you try and implement the same because you're seeing results, you're seeing betterment of yourself, you're seeing betterment of your sports, be it in terms of the last race had or the race which is coming up. So you always try and implement in your daily life as well. So that's for sure.
Yeah, it just becomes a part of you. You can't then say that, oh, I'm disciplined only in my sport, but in my life I'm not disciplined. It doesn't happen like that. Then you become a disciplined person, and then that person is disciplined in whatever area you push that person into. So then that starts developing your character, and it's pretty much the same way any of these personality development or self-help development workshops work. They tell you the same thing, right? Everybody tells you to practice these. They tell you to take charge and practice it diligently every day for, like they said, if you do it for 15 days or 30 days. I've been doing the same in just channel which is a little more physically driven.
Right. And that was the starting point when, which led you to be more consistent in the inputs you've been putting for yourself, which overall went in your entire life. Okay, so we would like to know more about Mahashweta. So, how does a regular day in life of Mahashweta would look like? What are your favorite workouts? What are your favorite meals? How is it?
So I have a very, very typecasted day, which I absolutely love. Uh, so my day typically starts around 3:34 a.m. in the morning, and I am usually out running around 5-ish. And it depends on what my run is, but usually around 5:30 latest is when I'm out for my run. Once I finish my run, we have this thing of going to a cafe nearby where we run. It's a local cafe where we go and have our morning coffee. And then I come back and I typically hit the gym. Maybe if there's time, I come back, I shower or whatever, and go to the gym. And when I come back to the gym is when I then do my daily ritual of prayers and everything, and then I have my breakfast, uh, and then I get to work. I usually start work around 11:30ish or something. I work with Sutherland, which is one of the largest IT companies in the world. I head their banking financial services marketing worldwide. So I get to work, and then the rest of the day goes in working. Sometimes, if I'm up to it, I really like cooking, so I get up and I do cooking. Maybe cook myself, cook lunch for the family, or nothing else. During the day, I do try and take a break by either reading or maybe just doing nothing, focusing on recovery. So I spend the time, maybe an hour or so in between my work, to kind of just give myself that hour to recover, It could be either through like rolling or going to the physio, or maybe even just getting some rest, reading some book. Rarely watching television. Not a big fan of watching television on weekdays. And then dinner is done by 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I'm usually working in the evenings because since the role is global, I have a lot of people who are based in the US, UK. So I work till about 9:30 usually. Once I finish work, I like to give a little bit of a me time. Maybe I write a little bit or something, and then I typically hit bed by 10:30. Yes. So that's what a standard day looks like for me. And in terms of my eating food, very simple. I like, my morning is usually like a very cereal, yogurt, fruit kind of a healthy meal. Lunch is dal, roti, chapati. I don't eat gluten because I'm slightly intolerant. I get sinus if I eat, so therefore I've been avoiding gluten for many years now. I don't do gluten and lactose both, so I do gluten-free roti, dal, chawal, sabzi, dahi, which is standard Indian lunch. And then evening, I usually do proteins. I really love chicken. Chicken and maybe salad or something. In between, I eat nuts and whatever fruits, maybe depending on what's in my diet plan. I do work with a professional nutritionist, so whatever comes as part of my nutrition is what I follow. I do eat out. I'm a foodie, I'm a Bengali by birth, so I do love eating food. But I am also, even then, I think my choices, as I said, are always to eat like maybe Thai or eating grilled chicken or eating anything which is gluten free. I like pasta and all if I get gluten free. I do cheat a little bit on pizza when it's not my race. Something I really love to eat is dessert. I can eat any amount of dessert which makes me really happy, but I don't eat as often. But that's what I eat. I'm a big fan of black coffee and dark chocolate, and I don't drink any added soft drink, all of that juices and all of that stuff doesn't excite me at all. So I avoid those calories and keep them in maybe eating some dessert instead. So that's what my life is all about. Outside of this, I really love to travel. Mountains is what is my calling. So we drive down a lot to the mountains whenever we can, especially with my work if there's a long weekend. And it really helps also that you can run any time of the day. It's chilly, cold. So we get to put in some good runs. That's when you probably ease out a little bit and eat or, you know, enjoy whatever you want to do for a few days. It's a nice break as well. But having said that, wherever and however I go, I think running is something that I always love to do. It's a great way to discover places. And then if you're going to some of these places which are natural, like mountains or something, I think it really, really gives you a very serene feeling because living in the cities, we don't get that luxury, right? We don't have trails here to run. We're running on the road. So I just enjoy seeing the place through running all the time. So wherever in this world I travel, I always carry my running shoe with me and I always try and at least have one run.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so Mashwata, any of your family member accompanies you in your runs? Have you been able to take them also in your sport? How is it?
So my partner is a triathlete and he is one of my biggest supporters in whatever I do, you know. But since he is also an athlete, he also has his races, so then we don't really at least international ones become a lot of a headache. Like for example, I'm going to Berlin, and then and just 2 weeks later he has his Ironman Goa, so he's not able to travel. But if it is anything in India, then we of course we travel together, we participate together. I think it makes our bond just very very strong because it's a big common factor between us. So I have been telling a lot of people, and as a coach, I think the one common challenge that I've always heard from my athletes is this: my partner doesn't appreciate me doing this. I have also had partners in the past who my ex-husband never appreciated me doing this. I've been with a lot of other people who did not appreciate me doing this. My father did not appreciate me doing this. He used to be very upset because of my diet routines or because of my living lifestyle. But you know what? There are only two ways to deal with it. One is to give in, and the other was like find a way around it because uh, it's okay for them to not support you. How does it matter? if you have to go to, say, a girls' night out, for example, or a men's all men boys trip, for example, you would still go, right? Your partners are not happy you doing these things, but you still do it. If you could do that, then why do you make that as an excuse when it comes to fitness? And you should in turn also, if you're gaining out of it and you're passionately doing this because you know what you're getting out of it, you should be able to find a way to convince your partner to come and do it. Maybe not full scale. I'm not telling everybody to go and run a full or a half or ultra. You can run a 5K and still get the immense benefit that we are all getting. So it is just an excuse that that person is giving. It's really not an excuse, if you so to say. Nobody's killing you because you're going out and doing your sport or any of that stuff. So my partner really, really supports me. I think he is my biggest cheer leader. He calls himself that I'm your biggest cheerleader. You go run, I'm going to cheer from you from here. So yeah, it's really, really great that the support he gives me.
Great, great. That's the way to look forward at it. So that's amazing. Okay, so Mahashweta, in your entire
Yeah.
journey, of course, everyone has setbacks. How they need how resilient you are, or how focused you are. There are times when you hit setbacks or plateaus during your journey. So, what would you advise for individuals who are facing similar challenges on their path from being fat to fit, or being dedicated enough to be focused in the goals which they have set? So, what would you like to advise them?
So the first thing I want to tell everybody is, like you celebrate your good, you should learn to celebrate the the not so good as well, which means your plateaus, or you've hit a roadblock, or you've had an injury. For example, I broke my foot in 2019 while working out in the gym, and I had a plaster on my leg, and I was not able to obviously run for 3 months. Now, I knew that if I don't do that, I am going to put on weight. So, on the day three of my foot fracture, I actually called home a friend who's a trainer, because I asked the doctor, can I work out? The doctor said, yes, you can do anything that doesn't make you walk or stand, because I had a cast on me. So I said, okay, I'll sit and work out. So I remember on day three, I actually started working out from the day three of my fracture. I used to sit in the chair. He used to help me sit, and then I used to do my upper body workout. And then I think means by seventh day, the doctor actually said, yeah, you can go to the gym, but the same thing continues, that because obviously at home you don't have machines and all of that. So then on the day seventh, I remember I started going to the gym. I also started doing intermittent fasting so that I don't put on weight. Calorie, there's two ways to manage weight, right? That you exercise a little bit and you do your calorie counting. So the point I'm trying to make is that it is a part of the game. You will have good days and bad days. It's the same that when the sun rises, the sun will set. So you don't fret away, saying, you don't get depressed because the sun is set, right? Because you know that there is sunrise tomorrow morning. The same applies, that don't fight it. Most people make it bigger than the issue in their mind, and it just blows up like this big whole balloon, giving it so much importance. Oh my god, I'm injured, I'm not able to do this, not able to do that. It's okay if you're not able to do that. You must be able to do something. Figure that out, saying, what is it? Is accept it. Give it that love, give it that saying, yeah, okay, I accept it that I'm not able to run, but I can in turn do these two things to just manage the situation and let it pass by. Sometimes just letting be, so that the time turns, is itself a very big win. You don't have to be successful every single time, but if you are able to stay on the path, you will eventually reach your goal. It's like, for example, you're walking, say, from A place to B place, and you suddenly realize that, oh my god, it is like, it's downpouring, and you need to go and take shade somewhere in the tree. If you take shade in the tree and wait for the rain to pass by and start walking again, you will reach the B, your destination. But if you stay there, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not in A, you're not in B. You will eventually probably end back going back, saying, no, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So resilience again is what I'm trying to say. I'm only trying to say two things: is that learn from what is not good, accept it. It's all right that You don't feel 100%. I don't feel 100% every day. I have a lot of bad days. I have a lot of days when my run is not as I would like to go. There are a lot of days when I don't feel like doing it. But then the problem is not that I don't feel like doing it. I still go ahead and do it. It's all right. So what? It's just an emotion. It has Nothing has happened to your body. Even if something has happened to your body, you will come out of it, unless it's like, sorry, but it's not like fatal, right? It's not like the end of your life. So whatever situation it is, you will come over it. Just be patient. So the other challenge with most people is that they're not patient. They want everything to happen here and now. It's not possible. It's a process. You have to believe in the process. You have to give yourself the time. You have to just accept it and be positive. One thing that always helps is that even if you can't be positive, don't be negative, be neutral. Saying, yeah, okay, today is not a great day for me. That's it, leave it at that. Don't dwell into saying, oh my god, this is happening, that's happening. Don't get into that whole what do you call web of getting into negative conversations, which leads to more negative emotions and so on and so forth. It's not my day. Okay, it's not my day, fair enough. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to go out and run. Yeah, go out, run, come back and move on. This day is going to end any which ways. Tomorrow is going to be a new day where you may feel great or you may not feel great as well, but we'll see tomorrow. But it's not such a big deal actually. We just make it big in our head. So don't make it big in your head. Just do what you got to do. Whether you feel or you don't feel is not going to define what you're going to do. So do it. That's going to define you.
True, true. That's rightly said.
I hope I answered your
Yeah,
question.
yeah, that completely suffices then. So, okay, so Mashwata, we've learned that you've experienced or you've participated in an extreme challenge, which was the Marathon des Sables. So it is a self-supported race in Sahara Desert. What inspired you to take such an extreme challenge, not only in terms of the climate but also in terms of the entire course? So can you please walk us through your experience?
So in 2019, I ran my first desert run in Pokhran in Rajasthan, 75 kilometers. And that was the first time I realized that I really love the terrain. And when I came back from that race, I saw the Netflix series called Losers, where there is an episode on Marathon di Sable. And this is about how an Italian Olympian actually gets lost in a sandstorm, and how he survives for 7 days, and then he goes back the next year and finishes the race. So since then, I've been wanting to do it, but of course, it's a big race. It needs a lot of training, commitment, planning, financially willingness to spend that kind of money, etc., to do it. Then 2020, of course, COVID happened, and we all know that these things were put on hold. So last year I signed up, and I then went ahead and did that. It was like a dream run. I've been waiting for almost 4 years, 5 years to do this race. So it's known as one of the toughest races. It happens in the Sahara Desert in the Morocco. It's 256. This year was 256, about 250 kilometers, and there are 6 stages. So when you meet 6 stages, that means that it happens in 7 days, and each day is a race. So every day there is a given distance. There's a start time and there is an end time by when you have to finish. If you do not finish within the time, then you're disqualified and you cannot continue in the race. So you have to like literally qualify each stage to finish the race. Also, the fun part of it is it's completely self-supported, which means that they give you nothing. They only give you like a tent, which is a shared tent by 8 people, and they give you water, which is plain water, at whatever temperature available for the race. Everything else that you need for your race, you got to carry, which includes your food as well. So 7 days of all my food, my race food, anything else I needed for the race, my sleeping mat, sleeping bag, recovery, all of that, everything you have to carry from here. And then every day you race with your bag as well. So it's not like you have a tent where you keep your bag, you go, you run and come back. So every day you're actually moving from A place to B place, B place to C place, C place to D place. So you start at one point and you finish in some other point. So you every morning you have to pack your stuff, you have to carry your bag with you and reach your next day's destination, which is a B point. At B point, there's a tent set up for you where you go. It's a dedicated tent to the team of people that is given. You go, you spend the night there, and next day morning you get up, pack up, take your bag, and go run the next day. So The day one, my bag was 11.5 kgs when I started the race. And every day, of course, the weight keeps reducing because you consume your food and other stuff. So that's what the race is. It's the most amazing thing that I've done in my life.
Superb. So, of course, the training would differ as compared to the regular races. So, how did you manage? How did you tweak your trainings? How did you tweak your hydrations? Because when it comes to very hot climatic conditions, you consume a lot of fluids. Your body requires it. So, how did you tweak that? And of course, you might have trained in India for this. So, how did you manage for acclimatizing to the weather conditions as well?
So the biggest advantage being in India is, and especially in Gurgaon, is that you're always running. Most of the year, you're running in heat. So heat acclimatization is the last thing I have to worry about. And I like hot temperatures, so I think I don't resist hot temperatures at all. So heat was not my problem. In terms of training, I last year did three world majors back to back, Berlin, Chicago, and New York. So I had been training, and I have always been in training, whether race or no race. I think I always like to keep training because it's not about the race; it's about the benefit of running each day, every day. So because I've always been in running and my running mileages are pretty high, I didn't have much of a challenge in upscaling my training. I just had to marginally scale it up to cater to the volume of the training. But otherwise, my threshold was set. So I only had to up my mileages to cope up with the extra distances. That was one. Second was I trained in Delhi only. I didn't go out and do any trail running or any of that stuff. But I think the training, and I also always support my running with a lot of strength training, a lot of mobility, agility workout as well on a regular basis. So my legs had the strength to kind of cope up with that terrain. And the terrain is not just sand. It's like, it's a desert, right? It's not just sand, it's very rocky. There's a lot of climbing that you need to do. Those dunes are actually like 3 4 floor high dunes I'm talking about. They are not those small dunes which you cross over. They are like mountains of sand. There is also very very high some climbings which you have to do, mountains, rocky terrains as well. I think overall, I my training was kind of bang on to cope with that. Being able to being going from India, I think the heat was I didn't struggle with heat. Like I saw that a lot of other people who came from colder countries, for them it was a lot. But I think being from India, there was like a tad bit of an advantage. In terms of water, they give you limited water. They give you 12-liter water only every day. That 12 liters what you've got to do your race, to do your whatever you need to do. They'll not give you any extra water. Extra water comes at penalty. So like if you take one bottle of extra water, then they add 30 minutes to your race timing for that day. So nobody wants to take that extra water because everybody is inching closing to closer. You don't want to add time to it. So unless it's like a dire need, you don't want to take water. If you borrow water from somebody else, you will get penalty as well. You're not supposed to take help from anybody. Like, you can't just go out and take somebody else's water and just so they're pretty strict, very disciplined in the way they organized it. So I think the big focus during the race was to keep yourself hydrated and to keep yourself giving you the enough electrolytes and salt tablets and all of that stuff. It's a lot technical as well. As much as physically enduring it is, you have to be very very careful that you drink enough water, you're taking enough salt tablets, the right amount of electrolytes that you need to put in, and so on and so forth. So thankfully I had a great team to work with me, my nutritionist team, to help me with all the electrolyte and food and everything. Food which is lightweight but yet will help me to recover, and of course my running coach, my trainer in Gurgaon, all of them put together, I think we made a great team to put this all through.
Superb, superb. So, you can you share some memorable moments or lessons which you might have learned in such a challenging event that would, you know, help you to give that essence of your ultra running?
I think the one time, I'll tell you the most toughest or hardest was on the day fourth, as they call it, is the long day, which means 90 kilometer, and they give you 36-hour cutoff. So I wanted to finish the race one shot, and they don't have a place to stop. You only have checkpoints. I think every 10 kilometers there's a checkpoint. and you can choose how you want to finish it. You have 36 hours to finish it. Now you can walk through the day, run through the day and the night and finish it, or you can run and sleep in some checkpoint and then finish the rest in the morning. I wanted to finish it one go somehow, and I thought it was the smartest thing I did through the race. And I once it got dark, the desert is silence that I've never experienced like in my life. There is nothing that you can see, there's nothing that you can hear. You can literally hear yourself breathe. It is still silence. So, and it is dark, and you have your headlamps on. You can only see the marker far away at a distance as a reflector, which is your road marker. And that night was one of the toughest nights I have had in my entire life. It was so, it was like you were in vacuum. It's like you're in space. You can't hear, see, do nothing. And I remember I was a little scared that I what if I get lost? It's so dark at night and you're all alone. I was mostly running alone, right? So I remember this one other person who was also alone, and I think we both had similar paces. So then I spoke to him. I said, "Are you planning to run through the night?" He said, "Yes, because I'm not sure if I stop and what if I can't wake up, right? All that happens, right? That you stop and then you frozen. You are not unable to move ahead. I don't want to take such chances." And same. So then through the night, we both kind of literally walked, ran together, and we finished the race at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that to me was, I still have like every moment live in me to remember, uh, in a positive sense, that to experience some that deep silence, uh, and it's hard to put it on words what you went through. So I think it's one of my most memorable experiences, number one. Number two is the last day. So the day fifth is when the fifth stage is the marathon stage, and which is the last day, which where they officially freeze the timing, and after that there's one more day which they call a charity day. So that day they don't calculate the time; it's more for fun, and they have a charity which they run, so it's kind of like support the charity kind. So on the 42 day was when they get you the medal, because that's the race kind of semi-finish, you get your medal. So I remember that day, like I waited for, since the time I registered, I think I waited for that day, which is like 6 months. And I had this dream when I used to train, and I was like, beaten down with training. I had this vision of me holding the India flag, wearing the MDS medal. And when I came back, so when I think I was about to finish like 500 meters, I had the flag in my front pocket. I took out the flag and I was holding the flag and waving it. And when I finished it, all I cared was to have that picture of mine, which was my dream. I think I was teary eyes, and I held that. That's a picture of my MDS, which everywhere you will see, because that was the picture I had lived. That was the dream or the manifestation, if you can say, that I had when I set out to do MBA. So I think those are two big memorable moments for me. The other memorable funny moment is that when you finish the 90 kilometer in the evening, after everybody has come back, they call you and they give you this little cold drink. Okay, it's like if you've seen those catch cold drink bottles, something like that, which is a cola drink and which is cold. Now, in that temperature, every water you get is actually literally warm. That's the only time you get something cold, which is like a surprise they gave you. And I remember when I drank it, it was probably 250, 300 ml. I drank half, and then I couldn't decide whether should I drink this or should I just keep it for a little bit. Then I thought if I keep this, it will become warm. So maybe I should drink it. So the 250 ml, I remember it was the most cherished drink I had. I don't drink Coke, etc. But with that memory in me and how amazing it is today, a lot of times when I see Coke, I'm very tempted to drink, because it's not that I like Coke. I'm not able to drink one here, but it just that takes me to that amazing whatever taste, and it's a cold drink you had. It's like a treat you get. So I think those are three of my most favorite memories of MDS at this point.
We could feel the chills when you were explaining your entire
Yes, it's life
journey in that
changing.
marathon. That's amazing. Okay, so Mashwata, you've been always disciplined and perseverance. It's always been an integral part of your journey. So, along with the same, being integral to your journey. Can you share a specific instance when your dedication and persistence in ultra running directly contributed in achieving the professional milestones or handling challenging situations in your career? As not only being a runner, you are a working professional as well, and that too in a marketing company, I suppose, an IT company. So, how do you manage to, I mean, like, take internally because you've been so strong in your sporting career? So, how do you do that?
So I think because of all the strength I've developed, and because of all the resilience and all of that I've developed, what happens at work is that there's always challenge, right? And then because I'm in marketing, sales and marketing is always at war. Like any other organization, sales thinks marketing doesn't do enough. Marketing thinks we don't have budget. It's like a war all the time, all the time. Like yesterday, I flew down to Bangalore for 2 hours to meet somebody who had come down to US, because it's important to convince and understand to that person. This is a new company I joined 2 months ago. So I think what it helps me is to not take this very close to me, get stressed about it, or take it like a big issue in my life or in my profession. I'm able to see it very objectively, not making it a big deal, and being able to look at from a resolution per se, not making it like a big challenge that I can't resolve times, because I think that has really helped. Saying, yeah, okay, you're telling me that I want $500, but you're giving me only $100. Okay, fair. Okay, I'll take the $100 and I'll see how best I can create a program which will give you the same impact which a $500 will give you. So I think that whole attitude of approaching a crisis situation has changed tremendously, which has helped me to smoothen up the roughness, because there's always challenge. There's challenge with people. You don't get along with people. People are, there is wantingly, unwantingly unsaid. Every company has a little bit of their own nuances of how they function. People, they are there. I think I have learned to become like say for example, getting approvals is so difficult. But then I will they know that I am pushy. I will keep telling them. I will wake up. I'll find out time when they wake up, when they are not busy, or I'll find other channels to reach out to them, maybe reach out to their EA. So I've always found workaround. No challenges become big enough for me to stop work. Now, I'll tell you something maybe which will help you understand this. Once one of my leaders said this to me, saying, Shweta is self-sufficient, and whenever she is given a work, you should know that it'll be done. And when there is a mail from her in my mailbox, I always prioritize it, because I know that she had tried everything that she could in her ability to resolve the problem. And when she has not succeeded in all the 100 solutions she could have done, is when she'd come to me. And this means that this is SOS, and I need to get out there to help her. So that is what probably has come of me ever since in my professional work. And because I believe in, doing the sport, winning, pushing myself, goal driven, achievement driven, that's what reflects in my work also. I always like that, I always say this, that when I leave, people should say that, oh, she did world class work. Everybody says world class work is what she does. And I think that is my biggest motivation to work. Of course, your salary, your appraisal, your all of that matters. But I think more than that, my focus is that the work I do should be the best in class that this company can get, because that is my USP. You pay money, you will get a lot of other marketeers. I am not the only one who's doing this. I don't have any rocket science with me. But the only differentiator of my USP is that my only focus is to deliver world class work to this company who has hired me, who's put their faith in me. So when they have put their faith in me, I will have to give everything that I've got. And that's what I do in my running as well, right? That I put all my faith in myself, and then when I put my faith in self, I go all guns blazing to give me what I really want to get, right? Like you just then focused in getting what you got to do. So I think that's how it has kind of, I have blurred those lines of what I do in my running and what I do in my profession. It's about who I am. I think it comes in the same breath.
Right. So that is your core of when we talk about Shweta, being a never give up attitude, or just pushing hard to achieve whatever you've maintained as your focus.
I only want to say that, before you give up, uh, you should be convinced that this is what this is the best of the best. I have given my 200%. 100% everybody gives. Have you given your 200%? If you still don't succeed, then go back and see why you have not succeeded. There's something that you could have done differently. The problem is that most people go and seek fault outside. Nobody. It takes a lot of courage to seek, within, saying, why did you not succeed? What is it that I didn't do right? What is it that I could have done differently? Could I have approached this differently? Could I have thought of this in advance? Nobody thinks like that. Everybody thinks, oh, I didn't get timely approval. I didn't have the budget. I did everything. Everything is somebody else's fault. Well, I am not saying that the others are not at fault. I cannot control that. Like whatever you are doing, it's not under my control. What can I control? I can control only what I am doing, right? So if I am able to find out, oh, you know what I learned that next time, this is maybe not the way to do it. Maybe this is what I could do differently. That is how you will succeed. That is how your rate of success will keep increasing gradually. You will still not be 100% successful. Nobody can be 100% successful. But then your rate of success will keep increasing if you take that attitude. And that is why I say that that attitude is actually supreme to every human being. Whether your sport, whether your profession, I think that is your differentiator. These days, a lot of companies are actually giving a lot of weightage to your attitude versus your qualification because that's a game changer for everybody.
That's true. That's the practical situation right now.
Yes.
Okay. So, Shweta, what practical strategies would you like your listeners to implement to develop a more resilient and a positive mindset, which is inspired by your own journey?
So I think the first thing I want to tell everybody is to be patient. Whatever, wherever, however you are at that stage of your journey of be it professional or personal, nothing happens overnight. The people who you idolize, they became idols not in one day. They have put years of work together to be where they are. Now, if you think that you will become them by doing it today, you are grossly mistaken. So please be patient. Even if you're sport at your work, it's a journey. It will happen eventually. But then give it the time. Whenever somebody says, oh, that person did this, that person did that, I just have one simple question to ask. How long has he been doing this? So first thing is to be patient. The second thing is that positivity is not, what do you call it? It's not a pill. It's not available in the market. The only way you can learn this skill is by practicing. And I assure you that you will fail and you will fail again, but then you will have to diligently practice. It's like, oh, I will be positive, I will live a positive year. It becomes a new year resolution. I joke like this, that don't make it a new year resolution. See, how are you going to stay positive? I keep a positivity calendar with me. I have a calendar on my study table which has a positivity calendar. The days when I don't feel very positive, I put a red cross on that. The other days I put a green tick. And that is a big reminder for me to say that, okay, I need to work on this. I need to continue working on it. And that's what I'm saying, that you consciously work towards being that, being positive. And the second thing is to be resilient and disciplined at the same time. They go hand in hand together. You will only be disciplined if you're resilient, and vice versa too. So I think that is the third thing, that good days, bad days, okay days, you got to go out and do what you got to do. Keep a calendar again for yourself, maybe, to say that, okay, today, like in for my runs in the same positivity calendar, I mark saying good runs and really bad runs. The other days I don't bother, but great runs I mark them, and then really horrendous ones also I mark them, and then everything else is in between that. It gives me a good stock of saying what's really happening with me. So if I see too many bad runs happening, then maybe it's something that's not all right. Maybe I'm not feeling great. So I go back and I talk to my nutritionist, or I speak to my coach and say, hey, something's off. I'm not feeling great. My runs are not coming out well, and so on and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by effort. So you have to be willing to put that effort. And to sum all of that, I think you need to have that attitude. So what I'm trying to say is that if attitude is a big box that you carry, under that you need to have three big tickets. One is to be patient, the second is to be positive, and the third is to be resilient slash disciplined. If you're able to do three things, then you will be the benchmark you want to become in wherever whatever space you are. And trust you me, can be applicable to your profession, to your personal, to even your family life. If you have, say, your partners, you can build your relationship around this as well. Positivity calendar can be a great calendar, saying how many times did I snap at my help or my, and my positivity calendar includes all of that. If even if I have like felt irritated towards my help for something, even that is a red mark. It's okay to be irritable, but you got to watch out. You got to like control and react in a way that you should react, because that reaction is going to set you back by 30 minutes. It's not worth it. If I can control that 3 second, then my 30 minute is saved. It's like ROI of whatever and however you're investing. So those are my four things that I would like anybody who's listening this to try and adopt. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. You got to make that box, put it in front of you, and focus on it every single day of your life. Practice.
That's actually very positivity, which you've mentioned, and especially the happiness calendar. We all should maintain that. It's
Yeah,
always better to
yeah.
just not sit and think, okay, what went wrong, or how was my entire. But when you look back, you know how your entire month was, how performance driven you were, how uh, professional driven you were.
I always like to think like this, that see, when you're happy, you don't complain. Oh, I'm so happy. Why am I so happy? But when you're not so happy, why do you complain? Like, it's good and bad is part of your life. It's like day and night. It's like, two sides of the coin. They both will exist. If you do not feel not so good, how will you know when you're feeling good? Then that good is like a plateau, right? So accept it. Learn from your not so okay days, maybe, and celebrate the good. That is the only way. And it's you should always say this, it is okay to not feel okay. There's nothing wrong in it. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Okay, so Mahashweta, ultra running, like many sports, have gender specific challenges and stereotypes, not in the running community but around in the society. Have you navigated these challenges, and also what message do you have for women aspiring to excel in endurance sports?
So so two things I want to say. First is that the women body is a little more complex than the men body. And we go through our cycles and complications related to it. You see a lot of women going through menopause, who is in the space of running, and so on and so forth. uh, Two things you can do is take support if you need to. Like, a lot of people I know have a lot of bad cramps during their cycles, and they're not able to run. So in those times, I tell my trainees, at least, they don't run. Maybe go for a walk or do as much as you can. So some of that is a part of what is living. You really can't do anything much about it. But if you have a good coach or somebody to guide you, maybe you could ask that. There are people like me you can reach out to with your, if you have questions in specific. I'm happy to address. I'm there on Instagram, and not so much on Facebook, but I'm happy to address specific questions if anybody has. But I think that is important, number one. Number two is that I think women really deprioritize themselves the most. Everything else to them is important, and the biggest excuse they give is, we don't have time. Trust you me, my mother is 65, and she goes to the gym every single day of her life. She's a homemaker. She does all the housework by herself. Her alibi is that it keeps me active, and I feel good doing it. So, with all of that, if she is 65. I have a full time job. I still do this. I have a home that I do carefully. If you can build an ecosystem around you, you get your helps in place, you have, and you manage your choices diligently, you can also do what I am doing. The only thing I want to tell you is that you are important, and not for yourself only, but also for your family. If you become sick, you become ill, you grow up to be an ailing old person, you're going to actually cause more trouble to your family and to your kids for what you should be doing. That's exactly what I told my mom. I said, Mom, you're going through menopause, you're going to have osteoporosis and break your head and leg and everything. I won't be able to be, I don't live with you, so it's going to be so difficult. I'm going to manage? Dad is old, dad's not going to be able to cope. So please start taking care of yourself, start going to the gym. It's been like 7 8 years, that day and this day, I don't think she ever stopped. So, all I want to tell everybody is that, our bodies are unique. We go through a lot of physical challenges. Fitness is not a good to have for us, it's a must have for us. So, I am sure in everything that you're doing, we manage everything else. We are the best managers the world have seen. So you should be able to manage your life and your day to take out at least 1 hour to give yourself the physical exercise, which is going to give you greater good in the long term. So, and then if needed be, take help, go to a doctor, or go to somebody who you think can help. And there are people who will tell you in your family, no, no, you're just fine, you look fine, women should look in a certain way and all of that rubbish. I am sorry, but if women fell ill, nobody suffers. It's only that woman who suffers. So all of this very mushy looking things, I'm sorry, but I think they are just delusional. So don't give too much weightage. Take care of yourself, because if you don't, then at some point you're going to just cause more trouble to yourself in your family. And it's high time we understand that. It is sad, when I went to run MDS, there were 1,200 people who participated. There were only 10% women. There was an announcement which came saying there was the first time ever that they had 10% women. It's not a number we should be proud of. And so is in all of our races. Everywhere else you will see, all this. uh, we got to first give it to ourselves. A long time ago I wrote this blog about it, and I don't know how people would take it, but you get to give it to yourself first. If you don't give and you expect your surroundings to give, they're not going to give. Nobody gave me. My father especially, I mean, he's the man. Everybody thinks yeah, parents will support. My father didn't support. A lot of my partners didn't support. Exes didn't support. But I said, it's okay, it's not for you to decide, it is my life. I know I don't want to live that unhealthy life that got me to the darkness of life. So, I think we got to just own, stand up for ourselves. If that's what that's what to say it in total.
Okay. Mashweta, as a role model for women in sports, how do you envision your contribution to breaking barriers and encouraging more female participation in ultra running? Not only ultra running, but just normal running, be it a half marathon, be it a full marathon, the comfort zone, and other demanding sports.
So I think as a coach, is something that I have been trying to contribute. That That's why I started a podcast of my own called Being a Runner, where I'm able to give knowledge and information to people who listen and pick up, just finer aspects, like you're saying, that, as a women runner, women related challenges, just things like that. So that's my way of imparting knowledge. I also do with another friend of mine. She's a runner too. We do a community once a month meet, which is called Run Talk, where we share and talk about everything related to running. Like we have one tomorrow where we're talking about how to run, a first 10K or a half marathon when you're running, because VDHM is around the corner. So what do you do, things to do, and so on and so forth. So that's what it is. I also, my biggest motivational story is to be able to bring my mom to fitness. She and I once did a race also together many years ago. So those are two ways. I uh, i i honestly am not a big fan of doing things on social media and sending posts and all of that. But I always say, any forum that I go to, that if you need help, if you need to talk, and it need not be, I'm not asking you to come train with me. I'm saying that if you need mentorship, for example, especially as a woman, I will be more than happy to impart that, or give that guidance to you. Uh, I have broken barriers, and I can maybe share my experience. Maybe maybe you could try and see if it works for you and see if you can change your life as well. And I think this podcast, it will also be one of those channels. I'm hoping that people who will hear this will be able to break some of those barriers, hearing my story, taking some of those things that I did and I learned through harder ways, you could learn listening to this podcast. So I think those are some of the ways that I've done. My biggest reason I started my podcast was the same reason, that I wanted to increase the reach and tell more people that if I could, then you can too. There is no rocket science in this.
That's true. Okay. So, Marshall, we would like to have some insights from you specifically into the nutritional challenges that women may encounter during the long distance runs. Also, how can they adapt to nutrition and address the challenges which would help them to optimize the challenges?
See, the biggest challenge that any woman especially in the sport, faces is low hemoglobin and lack of calcium. Of course, D3 comes along. Now, I'm not a nutritional expert, but being in this space for so long, I can tell you that these two things are extremely critical, especially for women. Our iron hemoglobin, most women in this country have hemoglobin low, and we shy away from taking supplements. So is calcium, especially women who are above the age of 40, especially before they get into menopause. My request to all of the women listening here is that please speak to your family physician or go to a nutritionist and get the right nutraceutical supplement. As much as you do food, sometimes it's not enough, and your its food is not just about how much you're able to eat. It is also about how much your body has the ability to absorb that from the food. So therefore, two things I would recommend is get your regular health checkups done. It's very, very important, annual health checkups, which gives you a clear picture of if you have anything. It's better to know and to treat it than again shutting your eyes and saying, oh, you know what, all's good with me. So get that regular health checkup done, and then uh, go to a doctor or your gynecologist and see and start taking preventive. What is important, especially for women, is that take prevention, because if you have hit that menopause and you've already had osteoporosis, then going back is like a near zero option. So start prevention, start early on, help do things which make you not get stressed about things, and I hate to use the word stress, but take it easy. There is a lot that we cannot control, right? Because of the hormonal fluctuations, there are so much that we cannot control, maybe. But in that time, if you're able to get some help, maybe, if yoga works for you, or going for a nice little walk works for you, or maybe even eating something which makes you happy, just treat yourself with love and care and respect, which is the psychological aspect of it. The biological aspect is that get your blood work, blood samples done, take the right kind of food for them, and the right supplements necessary. There's nothing wrong in taking supplements. So it only helps you to function better. And in today's world, it is must have. I take a whole lot of it, which my nutritionist recommends. So I think those are two big aspects I would want to focus on, especially women in that bracket of inching towards 40 and going on to the 50 bracket. The younger generation, you have a lot of benefit. Take care of your body. Don't hit with cholesterol, triglyceride, any of that stuff. Watch out for your lifestyle, because most diseases today are lifestyle driven. So get a little active. Do some fun exercises. There's a lot available in today's world to get active, and then watch out for your food as well. And anything which is fried, which is not whole wheat or everything, they're good to have. I'm not saying don't have. I'm not saying leave everything and start a life of a hermit. But I'm just saying that make your food choices wisely. Like if you eating outside 10 times, maybe 2 times eat the fried, and the remaining 8 times eat other things. There are a lot of other healthy stuff, not healthy really, but then a lot of other stuff which is not so bad as the fried stuff. So just some of that.
Right. Okay. So, Mashweta, what practical tips or time management techniques would you like to offer to women who aspire to excel in the career while pursuing ambitious fitness goals?
So the biggest thing about time is that most people think that time controls them. They don't have time. I mean, why don't you have time? I mean, what is it that you do that you don't have time? So you control your time, and that the only way you can do it is if you are able to measure it and monitor it. The simple facts of profession and business that we are taught, right? That if you cannot measure, you cannot monitor, and time is something that you can measure. So if you're able to measure it, and you have a, so I have like a timetable to me. The timetable includes what I do in the day. Like sometimes in the peak of my training, I go to swim. Sometimes I cycle. I have gym. I have physio, and I have a full-fledged work. I like to do meditation. I like to spend time with my friends. So it's not possible if I'm doing it random. So I actually put out like a timetable for myself saying, okay, this is how my day is going to look out, and all the days based on how, because the runs are constant, everything else is playing around saying, okay, I want to cycle 2 times. What is the optimum way to put it up? So I put a timetable to myself, and then I try and follow it. Once you put it out, you realize that there's so much more you can do it, as again saying, oh, I will want to do, and then you're not prioritizing or deprioritizing or knowing what you have to do, and then you're all over the place basically. So if you're able to do that, I think first thing is, you remember there was a reason why we had timetables in school, because that's the only way. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that plan your day, or plan your week maybe, or plan your month. So I typically plan my month, saying that, okay, I need to, I even plan like, okay, these are 2 3 people I've been wanting to meet, I've not been able to meet them because time's not clashing, so maybe I need to meet them. So I am like, to that level I go. I try, and you may still not succeed because it's not dependent only on you, right? Maybe work, something bumps up on the call, or say something happens, that person is not available, but then you at least make that effort. So one is to make that timetable. The second is that make smart choices. If you want to watch a late night movie to 2 a.m., knowing that tomorrow morning you cannot get up and do your fitness journey, then that's your choice. I cannot do anything about it. Like, I also have all the fun. I'm a total movie buff. I love watching Netflix. I'm always watching some TV series or the other, but I keep them for my Saturday afternoons. Saturday, post my run and lunch, my partner goes to work. I don't have office on Saturday, and I'm all by myself. So that is those 2 3 4 hours when I can either binge watch, I can go to parlor, I can go meet my friend, I can just read a book, do whatever. So I find that that's my sweet spot of watching all of this stuff. The other stuff, when I am doing it here, the only rare times when I maybe know that I don't have an early morning, I'll probably we'll sit and watch TV. But outside of that, we just planned it accordingly. So plan your day, make your smart choices, and don't feel that you're a victim if you're not doing it. Most people think that I have to sacrifice my life to do it. Oh my God, you should feel sorry about it. What are you sorry about? You're like, do you feel sorry when you spend 2 hours in the parlor, or you've gone and had like a ball of a party time with your friends? You don't feel sorry about that. Then why are you feeling sorry about taking care of your body and mind, right? So I think those are three things that I would like to practical tips for people.
Okay, okay. The last question for the podcast, you've already given a lot of tips and things which people should implement. But the last message, which would you like to convey to individuals who are beginning of their transformational journey, or are beginning of their self-endurance sports journey? What emphasizes the importance of positive mindset should they keep, or any of the message which you would like to convey to them?
First thing is that put a short term and a long term goal. Short term goals will make you stick to your plan, and long term goals will keep you to your journey. Why I say this is because if you put a goal saying, I will run a full marathon in 6 months, 6 months is a lot of time for someone who's starting off to stick to it. Instead, put a plan saying, this month I will run this, or I will break down into smaller goals, smaller goals, smaller goals, which are more, which will give you extra kick on yourself each day, so you can win each day, and then that win will be the motivation to go to the next, to the next, to the next. Same logic which applies to all our professional lives, maybe saying short-term goals, mid-term goals, and long-term goals. So that is number one, to do it. And then when you have that one win, that'll give you the motivation to go to the next. Above all, you got to be patient. It cannot happen overnight, unfortunately or fortunately. But the beauty of it is that enjoy that journey of doing it. People will do, there is a lot of, what do you call, people have FOMOs. Someone did something, they put an Instagram story, and oh my God, you feel like you're missing out and you're not doing this and you're doing that. It's your own journey. Pause and enjoy what and where you are now. If you don't enjoy the process, you will not enjoy the result, because the result is only for maybe half a day, but the journey is for months and years. Like, I'm doing this race on 24th. Whatever time I do that run, that enjoyment stays only for that long. But if I don't enjoy this journey of training and peaking and recovery and physio and all of that, I will never enjoy that, because that is so short lived. When you imagine that I'm putting all of this, whatever mind boggling effort for that 4 hours, 3.5 hours. So the fun of it is actually to do this every day. The fun of it is to every day step out and, okay, saying, okay, what am I going to wear today? Okay, what color shorts? Okay, who else is running? What happened? How was your run? What was my heart? Whatever. There are, like, I cheap thrills maybe. But then that's what is the motivation every single day. So start enjoying the here and now, start enjoying the journey, and it'll take you to places. So I think that's my 2 cents.
Okay, okay.
Many thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Till then, stay fit, stay strong, and race above.